With YouTube demonetizing independent media, please consider becoming a patron today for just $1 per month. Link below. Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is the Mundane Matt channel, and what we're seeing right now is probably the beginning phases of what's going to be a big culture war attack, either coming from the left over Captain America, or coming from the right over comments that were made by its star. I can't quite tell you which way things are going to go. I just kind of wanted to lay out what I've seen over the last couple hours and where I predict things are going to be going, because it's going to get really, really, really interesting. Now, this tweet popped up on Variety a couple times last night, and it says here, at Brie Larson calls for more film critics of color, saying, "I don't want to hear what a white man has to say," which is true. Now, this particular tweet has caused a lot of ire because it comes across as being explicitly bigoted. And the context of the comment doesn't really make it any better, although I do see what she's saying. Because you come over here to the actual Variety article, and it says, here's Brie Larson's speech calling for more critics of color. Now, Larson was on hand to accept the Crystal Award for Excellence in Film Wednesday night at the Beverly Hilton when she dedicated her speech to discussing the Critics' Choice study published by UNC Annenberg on Monday. Citing the study, Larson said that of the 100 highest-grossing movies in 2017, less than a quarter of the critics were white women, less than 10% were underrepresented men, and only 2.5% were women of color. Now, I do plan on covering that particular article, that study tomorrow, but this is popping up today. And ultimately, the thing with that is it depends on who's going to get into the industry, who's going to get into reviewing. Movie reviewing, game reviewing, tech reviewing is not for everyone. Anyone thinks they can do it, but it really does take a keen eye to really dive into it. And there are people out there that go to school that end up just doing that, and not everyone's going to do it. But calling for, I guess, trying to use it as an attack on the industry at this moment in time is probably not going to work out very well. Now, Larson emphasized that the issue presents for today's industry, given that reviews change lives and impact the films that are considered for award season. She also reiterated the importance of having an industry that truly reflects the communities we live in. And again, she's talking about diversity of reviewers there, and I do get what she's ultimately saying. But I don't know how much I agree with the reviews change lives aspect of it, right? Like, we know, at least through the ESA for gaming, that reviews from critics rarely have an impact. We're talking like about, I think it was like 11% of overall sales. And this is 2015 numbers. It could have changed by now. I haven't seen the updated numbers, but you can also, and that's the top, like industry, entertainment industry, is gaming. And so Hollywood and everything else is up there, but it definitely doesn't make as much money as gaming. So the emphasis on the importance of the sales there is going to be a lot higher for gaming, and reviewers like your Kotakus or Polygons or IGNs or GameSpots do not have the impact that they do. In fact, more people like me who talk about this from a fan perspective, we actually have a greater impact. That's why they call us influencers, which is a term I'm not a big fan of, but we have a greater impact overall. And so, but we're not represented on any of the social media sites. And I'm not referring to me specifically. It is simply a colloquial. So don't take that as me trying to say that I'm anywhere near as big as anyone else, because I am not. And nor am I a good film critic. I just tell you what I think about stuff and give you my honest opinion. Now, Brie Larson, though, she emphasized the issue that this presents. She says here, "Am I hating white dudes?" She says, "No, I'm not." But she says, "I don't want to hear what a white man has to say about A Wrinkle in Time. I want to hear what a woman of color, a biracial woman, has to say about the film. I want to hear what teenagers think about the film." Well, the thing is A Wrinkle in Time wasn't a good movie. And it was directed by Ava DuVernay, and it was, it was a big budget studio film directed by a black woman, and that was a big push for diversity and a big push for inclusion. And the movie tanked. It tanked bad, and that had a lot to do with the convoluted plot. And this wasn't just white people saying that; these people who read the book when they were a kid and loved the book. You had the right coming out and saying, like, this movie basically removes all the stuff about God. Right. And it just was a very convoluted plot that didn't know where it was going. It was a poorly made film. But she doesn't want to hear that if you're a white guy or a white woman. It wants me, because what the movie she's trying to essentially say is that the movie wasn't made for you. And that's not going to go over very well because movies should not be made for a specific demographic. They could have that in mind when doing pre-production, but ultimately a movie should be made for everybody. It should be. Whether or not like you elicit certain reactions or responses out of it, that's on the individual person. But movies are meant to be a broad storytelling effort. They're meant to bring everybody in. There are people out there of all walks of life who adore Lord of the Rings, even though all things considered, it's pretty much just whitewashed the entire time. Right? But there are people out there who are of color who love Lord of the Rings because they like the story, they love the characters, and they like that they can put themselves in it. They can enjoy the journey. But are you trying to say that a person who isn't of color shouldn't talk about Lord of the Rings because there's no one of color in it? Right? And we've already had those arguments about it being like inherently racist. That came out a couple years ago. This is where we find ourselves when we start having these discussions about who can and who can't review films, or who should and who shouldn't, or who should be listened to and who should be ignored. This is a very, very, very slippery slope that Brie Larson is wading herself into. And it's, again, this is the start of what's going to be, I think, a big next phase of this culture war, which is unfortunate because we should never be having this discussion about who has the right to review something, who has the right to discuss something, and whose opinion should be valued over somebody else's. If you want to find value in someone else's opinion, who happens to represent somebody else, that's fine, but that's your personal thing. Getting up there and making these comments in a public way are going to bite you in the ass, as we've seen. Now, she says here, if you make a movie that's a love letter to women of color, there's a chance that a woman of color doesn't have access to review and critique it. I'd like to know what world we live in where people don't have, especially here in the United States. If it was a movie that was aimed at women of color, they didn't go see it. Whereas Girls Trip, that movie last year, Tiffany Haddish, Jada Pinkett Smith, did really, really, really well. Women of color went in droves to go see that movie. Droves to go see it. They didn't go see A Wrinkle in Time. Even though directed by a black woman, featuring a biracial lead actress, having Oprah, Mindy Kaling, they had diversity. The movie just did not do well. Now, why is that? Is it because white people reviewed it? Probably not. Because the movie was convoluted mess. It had its problems, and ultimately it failed. So there's elements there, and Brie Larson knows this. She has to know this. But it's this ignorance, this unwillingness to acknowledge where we all stand in this particular place that movies can suck for a multitude of reasons. That forces her down this path of like, well, I'm gonna shift blame off of the movie not being good. That Ava DuVernay is not a good director on a big budget scale. She does better with smaller, more intimate stories. And that's, but I'm going to turn this on like, well, I don't care what a 7-year-old white man has to say about the movie. Well, it's not, again, I think you are really, really, really barking up a bad tree here. Now, she says here, she commends women in film for having the diverse representations on the carpet at the ceremony while challenging decision makers in the room to make an effort to create more inclusive industry both on and off screen. She concluded with a challenge to publicists and decision makers in the room, encouraging them to revisit their press line and junket invites to ensure that they are inclusive of underrepresented journalists. Please make sure these invites and credentials find their way to more underrepresented journalists and critics, many of whom are freelancers. I've done the freelancer stuff. I've gone to the Spike Scream Awards. I was on the red carpet for that, interviewing people. When they had the video game awards, I went there one year and did the red carpet, and there was a wide variety of people that were there. There was a wide variety of people. And so it's also about who is applying. These freelance journalists, they don't always go. They don't always get the emails. They don't always get on the lists. It's a very overcrowded market in regards to this kind of stuff. That was definitely a big part of it. Like I said, this is kind of biting her in the ass. The Variety did change the headline of this. Originally, it reflected what the tweet said, and then I think there was some backlash, some pushback, so they changed it, but the damage has already been done. And the reason why I'm talking about the culture war in regards to Brie Larson and Captain America or Captain Marvel is because of this article that popped up yesterday or today actually over at Cine Europe. They showed off some stuff for Captain Marvel, and it says this is from Kevin Feige saying that Brie Larson will lead the entire MCU in the next phase. So phase 4 is gonna be all about Captain Marvel and everything else. That's what's going to be the big thing. She's kind of taking over for Iron Man and Tony Stark and whatnot. And this could, in fact, have very, 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 very negative consequences. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is I'd like to kind of go back to Solo. Solo got hit pretty hard because there was a boycott that was pushed. The general thoughts on the film and outside of the industry bubble, or that the movie was not going to be good. I talked to multiple friends from multiple walks of life and asked them what they thought of Solo before going to see the movie, and they were like, "Oh, I all heard it." Everyone said, "I heard it was shit." Right? So if now we've got the lead who's going to basically be the mantle for Phase 4 of the MCU. Going out there and saying, I don't want white people reviewing certain things, or I don't want to hear, and it comes across very, very, very bigoted, even though she's just talking ultimately about wanting to get a different perspective. And that I understand, but she's also using it to attack other people. That can have a negative impact. And if I were Kevin Feige, I would sit there, I would look at this tweet right here, and I would be calling her right away and say, you need to not say a word. Because they now have billions of dollars riding on this particular situation, and this is where the next phase of the culture war is going to be. And I will put it to you as bluntly and plainly as humanly possible. There are people out there on both sides of this argument that are salivating at the lips for this because it's drama, it's chaos, it's clicks. It is. It's true. And I'm not going to lie. If it happens, I'll be covering it as well, because it's my job. But I would rather use this right now as a moment to try to actually call for as much of a ceasefire as humanly possible. Walk these comments back. Walk them back. All right. Realize that if you start going after the press in Hollywood, they can start coming after you, and that can have a negative impact on where things go. And this is the House of Mouse, a multi-billion-dollar franchise, 20 movies in a couple weeks. Things can get pretty crazy pretty quick. But like I said, there are a lot of people out there that are going to be salivating at the lips to cover this kind of stuff and hoping to perpetuate the culture war because they profit off the culture war. So keep an eye out for that. And I fully admit I have my own involvement, so there's that too. It's unfortunate. So I don't want it. I'm saying ways to stop it. But this is where we find ourselves. So those are my thoughts. I guess my plea as well. What about you? Let me know in the comments below. My name is, of course, Matt Jarbo. This has been the Mundane Matt channel. If you haven't already, please thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, and check back often for more content from me. In fact, if you want to see more content from me, you can totally do that right now.